I used to be one of those guys that thought that he had seen it all. When you spend years on the road, hauling loads coast to coast, you kind of get used to seeing weird shit all the time. You see people on the side of the highway in the middle of nowhere, going who knows where. You see hitchhikers that don't look quite right, like they've been standing there for far too long, waiting for somebody specific. You hear things on the CB late at night, voices that don't sound like they belong to anybody, just static, whispers, bleeding through the frequencies. But none of that really compares to what I found out in the desert. That day, I was a road dog through and through, living out on the road, just doing my thing. I didn't have a home base, just storage in a couple of cities and rotation in cheap motels when I needed a proper bed. The money was good, the freedom was even better. I did not have to answer to anyone. I made my own rules basically, and it felt good. I knew the best routes, the best diners, the best spots to catch a few hours of sleep without getting hassled by anyone. I knew how to keep my head down. The road has rules of its own. They're pretty universal in life, but it is especially important to follow them when trucking. Mind your business. Keep moving. Don't ask questions that you don't want answered. This particular time, I was rolling through the southwest. It was the last stretch of a 5-day run. The kind of drive that wears on you. The kind that after a while of it makes you start seeing shapes in the sand, faces inside the rock formations, heat waves rippling off the road, turning that whole world into a mirage of itself. There was nothing for miles, just dirt, scrub brush, and the occasional twisted tree. I made a bit of a silly mistake that got me into trouble. A rookie error that I knew better than to make. I made the mistake of eating gas station burritos twice in 2 nights, back to back. I should have known better, but I was starving, tired, and I just figured it would be fine. Yeah, you can see how this is going. My stomach had been twisting and rolling for hours, but I kept putting off stopping. I figured I could make it to the next rest area. Then the cramps hit hard. I realized pretty quickly that I was not going to make it any longer. I needed to pull over and fast. This was about to be a problem, not just for me, but the entire truck and driver's seat. I scanned the sides of the road. I spotted this little turnoff up ahead. Barely more than a dirt patch leading to a cluster of boulders. It looked private enough for me. I mean, fuck, anything would do at this point. No cars and no prying eyes, just the wind and the desert. I eased my rig onto the dirt, keeping the engine running. Pretty standard practice. Never shut it off if you don't have to. I grabbed my hand shovel and a roll of toilet paper. Then I locked up. I had a spare key in my pocket. Then I made my way toward the rocks. Moving quickly, I found a spot that would work well enough. A little dip between 2 boulders, shaded and tucked away. As I squatted down, I was scanning with my eyes out of habit. I was always 1000% aware. It's a trucker's instinct. I spotted something. A shape, half buried in the sand. A long pale bone wedged between 2 rocks, and it looked far too big to be an animal's. I stared directly at it. I got the feeling of something cold creeping into my gut. And then, that is when I noticed more. A ribcage. It was cracked open. A broken spine too. Twisted at this unnatural angle. A whole damn skeleton. Except no skull. Just a pile of bones, picked clean, left to bleach underneath the desert sun. Now I wasn't alone. I had squatted to take a dump next to a corpse alongside an old highway. For a second, I really could not move. I was just crouched there, pants around my ankles, staring at a skeleton in the dirt. My brain was trying to make sense of it. Maybe this was an old burial site, some forgotten grave cracked open by time. Maybe it was a hiker, lost and dead for decades now. But for some reason, those 2 ideas did not really sit right. The bones were not scattered like an animal had gotten to them. They looked like they had been placed there, arranged, in the skull. Where the hell was the skull at? And now I needed to see it to know for sure. The hairs on my arms stood up. The wind whistled between the rocks, shifting the sand beneath me. I suddenly felt exposed, like somebody or something was watching me. I finished as fast as I could, barely covering my mess. Yanking my jeans up with shaking hands, my body, my instincts, screaming for me to run. But I forced myself to move slowly, to be completely in control. No sudden movements. I don't know why, but I knew I could not look panicked. So I stepped backward, keeping my eyes on the bones themselves, then turned and walked toward my truck. Every instinct continued to tell me that something is wrong. I climbed into the cab and locked the doors hard. My hands were even sweating. I wiped them on my jeans and grabbed the CB radio. Flicked to an open channel. Anybody copy? My voice cracked. I cleared my throat. Breaker 19, I got a weird one out here. Anyone running 910 near mile marker 237. Static, and then a crackle. Copy that, pilot. What kind of weird you talking about? The voice was low and gravelly. Another truck rolling through the region, I guess. I exhaled, grateful for the company, even if it was just a voice. I think I found a body, I responded. Silence, and then, say again? I licked my lips. Pulled over for a nature break, found a skeleton in the rocks, no skull. The trucker then let out this long breath. Shit, you call the cops? About to, I said. Figure it's the right thing to do. Where you at? Couple of miles off the main drag. Little pull out with some boulders. There isn't of a pause. Driver, you near the border? Yes, we are both in this neck of the woods. Well, the trucker said, you get back on that road and don't stop till you're in the next town, you hear me? My stomach then twisted. What? Don't call nobody. Don't look back. Just go. My hands gripped the mic tighter. You know something that I don't? The trucker just sighed. Cartel dumps. Seen it before. You ain't supposed to find that body. Someone put it there for another reason. My mouth went dry, pulse pounding, like I was having a heart attack. I let go of the CB and grabbed my phone. Maybe the trucker was right. Maybe this was a cartel business. But it did not sit right with me either. The bones did not look fresh. No smell, no flesh, just dry, sun-bleached remains. And the skull was missing, so it did indeed feel deliberate. I pulled up my keypad, about to dial 911, and then I looked in my side mirror. A black SUV coming fast out of the desert. I froze. It had no headlights, no plates. Just a dark heavy thing gliding across the sand, almost like a predator. My gut immediately turned to ice. It pulled up alongside of me, idling. My window was up, doors locked, but I still felt exposed. The SUV just sat there, engine rumbling, as if deciding what to do with me. Then the passenger window rolled down just a crack, and a voice drifted out, muffled. You need to leave. I swallowed, every muscle locking up now. The voice said, or we make you. I could not see inside. It was far too dark, but something slid into my view. A pistol barrel aimed right at my head. I did not think, I did not breathe. I just threw the truck into gear and stomped on the pedal. My rig lurched forward, tires spitting dust. The SUV did not follow. It just sat there, watching as I blasted back onto the highway. I was shaking so bad, I could barely even hold the wheel. I did not stop, and I did not look back. I just drove, headlights cutting through the emptiness, the road stretching on and on. In my mirror, the SUV still sat there, motionless inside the pullout, watching me. I don't think I let off the gas until I saw the glow of a truck stop in the distance. My hands were cramping from gripping the wheel that tight. My shirt was still damp with sweat. I pulled into the lot and parked and just sat there. I was trying to piece together what the hell had just taken place. I think I should have just kept driving. Should have listened to that trucker. But something about the whole thing just gnawed at me. I did not like being ran off like a dog. I grabbed my phone and called 911. The dispatcher answered calmly and politely, and I told her everything. The pullout, the skeleton, the SUV, the gun. She was quiet for a brief moment, and then asked me to hold. A moment later, a new voice came on the phone. A man this time, deeper. "You said mile marker 247, he asked. "Yeah." Another pause. "Stay put. The unit will meet you at your location." They showed up about 20 minutes later. 2 deputies in a tan cruiser. They took my statement and asked the usual questions. Did I see faces? Did I get a plate? Did they fire the weapon? No, no, and no. One of them, a stocky guy with this thick mustache, scratched at his chin. "You said the bones were missing the skull." I nodded. His partner, younger, leaner, exchanged a look with them. They definitely knew something. "You all seen this before?" I asked. Mustache shook his head. "Hard to say. Lot of deaths out here. Lot of old graves. Not like this though," the younger cop muttered. Mustache just shot him a look. "We'll check it out. You mind showing us the exact spot?" Honestly, I did not want to go back, but I wanted answers. So we drove off in a caravan. Me and my rig, and them in their cruiser. My stomach knotted as we pulled into that turnoff. The SUV was gone. Just empty road and desert silence. The deputies stepped out, hands on their guns, and I led them to the spot. My footprints were still there in the dirt, but those bones weren't. The boulders were undisturbed. No sign of a struggle. No sign anything had ever even been there. Just one lone femur, half buried in the sand, like somebody left it on purpose. "Son of a bitch," Mustache muttered. The younger cop crouched down, studying the prints. "We got boot treads," he said. "Multiple sets." I felt sick. They'd come back and taken the remains and wiped the place clean. Even my pile of toilet paper was gone. The younger cop just stood up and dusted his hands off. "We'll have the crime scene guys check it out." I don't really think I bought it. Not entirely. The way they just kept looking at one another, the measured ways they spoke to one another, it all felt scripted, like they were telling me a story. "You guys going to call it in?" I asked. Mustache just let out this breath. "Yeah, we're just going to file a report." And that was that. I think I knew better than to push. By the time I got back in my truck, my skin was crawling. I pulled out and got back onto the highway, watching my mirrors the whole way. Did not stop until I crossed state lines. I never really heard anything more about it. No news reports, no missing person updates, nothing. Like it never even happened. I did a little reading up on my own area and did find some articles that led me down some rabbit holes. I found the skeleton in 2016. There had been shootouts and skirmishes of some kind between rival cartel factions on that exact same stretch of highway in 1999. There was also a woman who went missing along the same road, allegedly abducted from her car after sustaining a flat tire. The more I read, the creepier it got. It turned out that there were lots of people that pile of bones could have belonged to. Whatever the case, I don't live there, so I don't really continue to follow the findings. I am not even sure it was reported. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you do and you want to hear more, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel and leave a comment down below, as it lets the algorithm know that you like my content and it promotes it to more people. My goal for the channel is to hit 50,000 subscribers, and we're closing in fast, so thank you, and back to the stories. Believe this or not, but it happened. My best friend used to live pretty much opposite Aleister Crowley's old house. We live in Hastings, England. Her little sister used to wander around the house at the age of about 2 and come out with these sentences that were weird for a child of her age, like, "I wish to converse" or some shit. Anyway, she began talking to these other people that we could not see, and it was put down to imaginary friends. But she used to say, "Mom, who is that man in the chair?" And there was no man or chair there. She would look to the ceiling and say, "I don't like you, Mom. I like my other mom," who was apparently on the ceiling. I don't know. Then it got weirder, and she would get up in the night, eyes wide open, and speaking some weird gibberish, and scratch at a certain point in the wall till it was breaking away. Even if when on occasion it made her nails bleed, she would tear at this wall, and if spoken to, would stop and turn sharply to stare at whoever spoke. Did not even blink when this happened. Terrifying. Now though, she is in secondary school and says she does not remember any of that, but can remember an old woman that used to always be around the house. We've declared that this woman was probably the other mother that she used to say and talk to. She still gets weird feelings now after moving, but does not behave like that. When going to a new place, such as a new house, we often ask her if there are any weird feelings, but she mostly just ignores our pestering now. I pretty much grew up with her family, so witnessed a lot of it. Looking back, it was fucking weird. Hello X, I offer you a break from schizopaths and succubus summoning with a few stories from my family. I just got back from spending time with my relatives for my grandfather's birthday, and he retold an old story. This reminded me of a few of the stories relatives have told me, but I will start with his. B. Grandpa, visiting sons, my uncle's land. Family trip, wanting to do some hunting and fishing, typical Missouri pastimes. Been in woods all day, now late in the evening and getting dark. No deer today, feels bad man. Decide to head home. Leave stand with uncle, other son, my dad, and brother are on the other side of property. Walking through woods, back to uncle's cabin. Dark as shit now. See glow ahead. What the fuck? Points it out to uncle. He sees it too. Approach. Because uncle wants to make sure nobody is on his land that shouldn't be. Not scared. Armed with hunting rifles. I think they said they had 38s. Not gun savvy, so sorry if wrong term. Reach source of the glow. Not a flashlight, fire, glow stick, etc. It's a fucking soccer ball sized, gooey mass. Decide to, in my grandfather's exact words, blast the shit out of it. Grandpa and uncle's bullets just get sucked into the ball. No bullet hole, no damage, nothing. Bullets just sucked in and stay there. Fuck this, we out. Hurry back to the cabin and don't look back. I've heard this story a few times from my grandfather and uncle, each separate and always the exact same details. This consistency is particularly impressive in my mind for my grandfather, who is getting well on in years. Uncle's land honestly looks like the place for spooky shit to happen. Land is massive and mostly wilderness other than the couple of houses, most abandoned and falling apart, that workers live in. The entire place is covered in small lakes and ponds and a good number of caves. Most caves are roped off or being used by geology students for whatever rock people do with rocks. Here is a story from my sister, a classic from when she was little. She used to spend summers at our paternal grandparents' village, which is about 30 kilometers away from the city. The village is slowly dying now, but back then, it was still fairly populated. I also visited a few times as a child, but I did not like it at all. Once I started school, I refused to go back and instead signed up for various summer camps. I have always been more of a homebody and an introvert. My first visit to the village when I was 5 was terrifying. A huge Doberman from our neighbors nearly killed me. There was no control over the dog, and it knocked me to the ground, holding me there, while its owner shouted from across the street, "Alton, you can't, come here." I don't know how I didn't freak out completely. These days, I only go there on rare occasions for business. Anyway, my sister was still a preschooler when she spent those summers there. She would play in a sandbox next to my grandparents' house. By the way, they built it just for her, and it is still there. She had 2 playmates, a younger boy and an older girl. Nearby, clothes and bedding hung on a rope to dry, and behind it was the barn. It was a warm, sunny day, and my sister was playing when she saw a woman she did not recognize coming from the side of the house. The woman walked through the clothes, heading straight toward the barn. The barn was attached to a solid fence, and its entrance was on the opposite side. The woman seemed to walk straight into a dead end. My sister waited for her to come back out, but after a while, she realized that the woman had vanished. She got up peeked around the clothes, and saw no one there. The strange thing was, the boy who was playing with her also saw the woman pass, but the girl claimed no one had been there. It reminded me of a strange encounter I had with a girl at a friend's apartment. Later that summer, another strange event occurred. Near the barn, there was a summer shed, and about 10 steps away was the village toilet. Between the shed and the toilet, there was a small niche. One evening, my sister went to the toilet and heard a strangled, laughing noise coming from that niche, like someone was trying to hold in their laughter, but couldn't. It was already twilight, and my sister felt uneasy. She stopped and listened, and the laughter continued. Then it sounded like 2 different voices. She stepped aside, moving to the center of the yard, and walked around the barn to get a better view. As soon as she reached a spot where she could see the niche, the laughter stopped. Naturally, there was no one there. She is certain the laughter came from just around the corner of the barn, not from behind the fence. A few years later, she had another strange experience. She went to the village again, and one night had a vivid dream. She woke up to see a red-faced dwarf crawling out of the stove and urinating in a bucket beside it. The urine was blood red, almost filling the bucket. The next day, or maybe a few days later, my grandparents' ball broke its neck trying to jump over a fence in the meadow. Grandpa had to have him slaughtered. Later that evening, my sister saw Grandpa carrying the same bucket, rinsing it at the washstand in the yard, the inside still stained red with blood. After these events, my sister started to believe in witchcraft. She would tell these stories convincingly, and as a child, I thought she might be psychic. However, whenever she tried to predict something or summon something in front of me, it never worked. I've got a real story. I have no proof that it was actually paranormal, or if it was a problem with the camera/film. I wasn't ever able to actually see the negatives. That said, I went to Crazy Man's in Roanoke, Texas, with a few friends to see if we could catch anything on film or audio. I won't go into the stories about Crazy Man's, you can look them up online. One of them brought her camera and was trying to take a picture of the water tower, but she complained it was not working when she tried to take a picture of the tower. I had taken photo art in high school and knew cameras well enough, so I asked to see the camera. To begin with, the camera used 35mm film and was set to autofocus. On this particular camera, the lens focused on whatever was in the center of the camera. There were no options to change where the autofocus was. So, I got the tower in frame, then lightly held the button without fully pressing it to get the lens to autofocus. It would not focus upon the tower. What was clear, however, was the tree line behind the tower. It perfectly focused on the trees, but not the tower. In order to get the shot, I turned off autofocus and manually adjusted it until I had a clear image of the tower in focus. Anyway, a week later, the photos were developed and one of my friends came by to show them to me. In the picture I took, the only one that was in portrait instead of landscape, the tower did not appear at all. I can't rule out the possibility that they were fucking with me, or that the film was bad in some way that I could not fathom. All I know is that the tree line that was behind the tower appeared in the shot. The tower itself, however, was not there at all. Anyone else witness a horrific crime? I saw a guy get murdered. Be me, walking back from store with rack of beer, not a care in the world. Walk past a park. The park has some low-level drug dealers, but it never felt unsafe. Hear car skid on its brakes. Guy jumps out of a minivan. Runs up to guy with gun drawn. 2 shots to the head. Red mist, but not as much as I expected. The victim was talking to a woman in a pink jumpsuit about 2 feet away. The woman runs towards me. I see the deep purple blood that's inside the brain on her shirt. She is screaming and crying, but can't produce any actual words. I run and hide behind a car. When I hear the minivan skid off, I go home and crush the whole rack of beer and watch American Dad. Still dream of it occasionally. B middle school me. B at a Christian summer camp. It was one weekend in late September or early October. B staying in shitty one-room cabins with a bunch of bunk beds. It's just me, my friend, and 3 or 4 younger girls that I don't know. Wake up in the middle of the night, can see clearly because the younger girls insisted on keeping the lights on. Look over to see friend sitting on one of the bunks parallel to me. Has the creepiest fucking smile on her face. Blank stare, face-splitting grin. Stares straight at me, not even blinking for almost a solid minute. I am creeped out at this point, but exhausted enough that I don't give a shit. Pull covers over my head and try to ignore it. After at least 10 minutes of her just staring at me, she gets up and walks across the cabin. Stops next to my bunk. I can just feel her staring at me. Finally, I hear her walk away, open the cabin door and leave. Gust of wind comes from outside, blows out pilot light on tiny, shitty gas heater in the cabin. I have to go relight it, since I am the only one awake, and the cabin will get freezing cold without it. Get out of bunk, reach over to get my lighter out of my bag on the floor, happen to glance into bottom bunk. Friend is dead asleep in there, covered in blankets. Nope. Lock cabin door, cover windows, relight heater. Try to sleep, fail miserably. I went on that trip a couple years in a row and have quite a few stories, despite only being there for a couple days each time. The other ones aren't quite as solid, but I will try to remember some. The entire camp in general was creepy as fuck, and things were a bit unsettling all the time. It was located in the Smoky Mountains, so it was super foggy most of the time. Earlier than 10 AM, and later than 8 or 9 PM, hanging out with group of friends in field near cabins. It is early evening, and the fog is extra thick. For whatever reason, group of friends disperses, and we all start running around in the mist. Friend from the first story suddenly comes running back, calling some of us together. Say she saw a certain dog that had hung around the campsite the year before and that she loved. She followed after him, and ended up at one of the fire pits. There was a campfire going, and a group of really cool old people there. The rest of us are curious, but slightly weirded out since the campsite is the only thing for miles, and no one is allowed out there except the group who pays for the cabins, at the time our church. We follow her to the campfire. It had only been a couple minutes since she had left it, but no one was there. Fire was going though. What? Also, turns out that the dog she saw had died the previous year. Me and that same friend, who was my best friend at the time, and who I spent most of my time with, as you could tell, didn't get along very well with the younger girls that we were bunking with that year. They were bratty and we were bossy. The two of us had wanted our own cabin room, but they ended up needing that space, so settled for just intimidating and bossing them into doing things the way we wanted to. Now, the cabins themselves were made up of 3 separate rooms. These rooms are what I call cabins in my first post, because it was easier to explain. Each one of them was just the same tiny room with a couple sets of bunk beds and one heater. Each room opened straight outside. They had absolutely no insulation and were basically just giant popsicle stick houses. We arrived at night and immediately went to separate into our bunks, then had to go to sleep. I did not get to explore anything until the next morning. When I did, I realized our cabin actually had an attic room. There was a staircase wrapping around the side and back leading up to it. See stairs, get excited, rush back to room. Tell friend, some of the younger girls over here. All of us want that room for ourselves. Me, friend, and the 2 less annoying girls follow us up the stairs. Pretty rickety. The door is jammed, and we have to basically kick it open. As soon as we all step in, it feels like I've been hit by a brick wall. Air knocked out of me, can't breathe, fall over, and have to grab onto one of the single beds, ceiling too low for bunk beds to keep my balance. Managed to throw myself out of the bed and stumble/fall out of the room. Collapse on little platform at top of stairs. Other girls around me, looking shocked and wheezing. I slammed the door shut because wow, fuck that. Once we get our collective breath back, we talk and realize we all felt the same thing. The girl at the back said that as soon as we stepped in, we just keeled over. What the fuck? Agree that none of us are ever going back up there ever again.